At the RPA state convention on June 8th, the body overwhelmingly passed rules that will change Republican primaries to be a closed primaries. Here to talk about this today is attorney and election law expert Clint Lancaster.
Hey, Jenny Warren.
Hey.
So I'm so impressed to be here. Everything is so shiny and new.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah,
you know what? You're always on Zoom.
I am.
You're never here in this fancy studio.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm very happy to be here, and I've done a lot of research on this the election or the law and how closing primaries, and I'm happy to dispel some myths and maybe set the record straight.
I feel like there's a meltdown right now.
There is something going on. They're very quiet on the Hill.
Well, they're quiet on the Hill, but then there's also this narrative that I think is happening right out of the gate. I started seeing it immediately Sunday. Oh, well, the law is questionable about this. Can we even do this? We're going to have to look at the law, or, the legislature may have to check in. As you know, here at Conduit, we have several attorneys on the staff. Our co-founder, Brenda Vassar-Taylor, is an attorney. She says that there is not a law more clear than there is about this one, about closing the primaries.
And you're right, there is. I mean, this is a bright line thing. So it comes back down to your First Amendment right to associate and your First Amendment right to speech. Okay, so you have the right to associate with whoever you want. And in this case, we are conservatives. And so part of what the U.S. Supreme Court has said is that you cannot force a political party to associate with people that they don't want to associate with. And to that end, our statute says that the party will determine the qualifications for voting in their primaries. And we did that Saturday.
So why do you think there's this I mean, I can make my assumptions of why I think that this is, but why do you think there's this push right now, even from a lot of Republicans who are saying, nope, we can't do this right now. The time is not right. We're not sure about the law. The legislature may have to step in. I mean, we heard this argument even at the state convention, even prior to the state convention on Saturday. Well, we may have to get into why do you think that is?
So because right now the elected officials are protected by the party. And so they have the ability with an open primary to get moderates, as John Brummett's article in today's paper talked about party rating. The man just admitted the party rating. This is the problem. And so we with that type of atmosphere, anybody can come in and anybody can help someone get elected that maybe isn't the true conservative. But by closing the primaries, it allows the core group of conservatives in the Republican Party to pick their candidates. And so now no longer will a more moderate or even a more liberal candidate be able to win in the primary. And so case in point, I consider Clint Penzo a friend. But when Clint Penzo ran for Congress against Steve Womack, he found that the party apparatus was against him. The governor was endorsing the incumbent. They were funding the incumbent. They were not funding him. Okay, now the party can't protect him. And I think that if this was if Clint Penzo's race was on the ballot in November, that primary, he would win.
Well, I think that's interesting that you brought that up. On Twitter on Sunday, a Democrat, in all caps, she tweeted at Steve Womack, and I'm thinking that she probably thought Womack was at the meeting on Saturday. Womack, what are you doing? Do you not realize that myself and other Democrats crossed over and voted for you, so we could not get Penzo in office? Now in 2026, Penzo is going to win because of this choice. And it's like, bingo.
That is the problem. That is
right.
So while I was at the convention, there was a delegate from Mississippi County, and he said, I got to have my primaries open because I got these JPs that are elected, and they're good JPs. But if you close the primary, the Democrats can't come vote for them, and they'll be out of office. I'm like, yo, that's the problem.
Right.
That's the issue.
Yes.
And so, and like I said, Brummett talked about it in his editorial. He admitted to party rating. This is what we got to stop. And so by closing the primaries, what you're going to see happen is that the more conservative candidate is going to reap the benefit of the RPA. Well, let's take Clint Penzo, right? Now, I think if Clint Penzo's race was on the ballot for this fall, for November, he would win if it was a primary. And the reason why I say that is when Steve Womack got Penzo he got primaried, what happened? Well, the governor came up. She said, I endorse Steve Womack, which you're not supposed to do.
Right.
And the party says, we endorse Steve Womack, which you're not supposed to do.
Legislators immediately, Bart Hester, right after the governor did, Bart Hester came out and endorsed Womack.
And Penzo is his colleague in the Senate.
Yeah,
And so, and then of course, Penzo didn't get the benefit of the party's support
right.
or the party's money.
Yeah,
And so what happened? Why? We had a more moderate candidate in there that they wanted to keep in.
yeah,
No, I think it would have been great for Clint Penzo to go join Matt Gaetz in the Freedom Caucus.
yeah. Well, and speaking of Matt Gaetz, whenever he was there at the first and second district congressional joint meeting, I brought this up to him. I said, you know, Arkansas, we still can't get close primaries, because he was talking about how red Arkansas was. Arkansas is one of the most conservative states. And I was like, hold on. I was like, wait a second. We can't even get close primaries here. And he's like, what are you talking about? You have a supermajority, you have the most conservative governor. And I said, well, that most conservative governor actually voted at our summer meeting to keep the primaries open. And then once she did that, that signaled to all of the legislators to vote to keep it open as well. And he said he was stunned. He could not believe it that they would not want that in their own state. And he was like, even in Florida, where we have close primaries, he said, even in Florida, we know that the Democrats don't want us crossing over in their elections. He said that is like giving the opposition your playbook. He said it's common sense. You don't want that. And I think the reason why, and we've talked about this at Conduit so many times, the reason why we have so many moderate Republicans and we're not as red of a state as I think people would like for everyone to believe, it's because we have open primaries, and these moderate Republicans or the Womacks of the world are able to get elected. And if anything, they're more purple, and they just put on that red jersey, and closed primaries in a lot of ways will remedy that. And I think I told you earlier, there was a representative I saw comment, it was Representative Scott Richardson. He made a comment in the Benton County Grassroots group on Facebook. And he said, well, the platform, those are just guidelines.
This is not Pirates of the Caribbean. The code is not just guidelines, right?
Wow. And this may be surprising to you, but Richardson is also for keeping the primaries open.
He wants to be reelected.
Yeah. So.
Well, that is the problem. Those are, and so, and also what happened is we took the votes away from the elected officials at the state committee meeting. So now they won't be able to vote lockstep with the governor to keep the party, so the party can keep the incumbents protected. That's over. Yeah. That's over. So I think it's a great thing, and I'm excited to see because our state's going to be more like Florida than Arkansas. And I'm like to be, why do we still have an income tax? Yeah. In the state. Right. Well, so we're going to have a special session next week to cut taxes. Okay, how about we just get rid of income tax? No, you gotta, as we say, Conduit, dance around the edges a little bit, just continue to talk about it. Well, but I want to, speaking of the special session, and I think something that we need to keep an eye on, I know people are talking about FOIA. Will they do something about FOIA? But coming out of Saturday, I've heard many people talk about, well, maybe the legislature will have to do something about this. I had one legislator tell me Saturday, well, you know what? If this is the direction that the party wants to go, perhaps that our filing fees don't go to the party anymore, that we file with the Secretary of State's office. Sure. So that would be illegal. Okay. And the reason why is the U.S. Supreme Court has said, and it comes back to your freedom of association, your freedom of speech, parties get to choose who they associate with. They get to choose who it is that they want to be with and who can vote in their party or in their issues and what they can say politically. And so you cannot direct party money to go to the state. Okay, that's illegal. You cannot limit, so there was a case out of California where they wanted to force the party to open up its primaries. They said, no, you can't do that. There was another case out of the Supreme Court and twice out of the Arkansas Supreme Court that said that voting in a primary is such a fundamental part of the democratic process that you cannot take away and separate the taxpayer from that. In other words, you must have tax-funded primaries, okay, and they can close their primaries, and that's perfectly fine. It's an American thing to do. So this is something that is not it's not illegal. It doesn't require legislation. The legislation's already in place. All we have to do is act on it. Yeah. And so I'm disappointed here. Maybe you could share with your viewers what the Secretary of State said. The Secretary of State has said the Republican Party of Arkansas has indicated they are wanting a closed primary for the Republican Party. The Attorney General issued an opinion last year stating that legislation was not needed to make this change. I agree with the Attorney General. However,
The opinion was narrow, and I believe legislation will be needed to provide the framework to implement this change to ensure that no voters are disenfranchised. Unpack that for us.
Okay, so first off, the Attorney General says no legislation is required. Okay, but now it's like, it's really happened. Legislation is going to be required. And if not, because we don't want to disenfranchise the voter. There is not a term in election law more misused or misunderstood than disenfranchise the voter. It's a progressive liberal buzzword to scare people into thinking, oh, you're taking away someone's right to vote. But you don't have a right to vote in a primary. You have a right to vote on election day for the candidate that the party puts forward. If you want to have a say in who the party puts forward, you have to join the party. And so you don't have a right to vote if you're not a member of the party and don't qualify. So this disenfranchisement, you hear it all the time. And I'm like, hey, I don't think that means what you think it means.
I love that one.
So, I mean,
Well, and you're seeing that right now on social media. I'm even seeing, I don't even, conservatives use that talking point, and they're flashing the numbers of Arkansas voters. X number of people are optional or not, registered, and you're going to disenfranchise this massive number of voters. And what do you say to that?
You can't disenfranchise these voters because they don't have the franchise to begin with. They have the right to vote on election day, not the right to vote in a primary unless you're a member of that party. So no, this is like some kind of sleight of hand move. You're going to disenfranchise them. Well, no, wait, they don't have the franchise, but you're going to disenfranchise them.
To me, and this is, what do I know? It seems that when they didn't think that this rule would actually ever get passed, it was like, no, yeah, this is something that can be done. The law clearly states it. The AG opinion says, yes, it can be done. Legislation is not needed, because they felt like it would never really get passed. And we saw those efforts, really try to be made to keep it from getting on the floor June 8th. But the people spoke, it got passed, and now they're like, oh crap.
Yes. And that should be the sentiment if you don't like it.
Right. But, and as we're heading into the special session, is this something that what do you expect? And if they try to draft legislation about this, what do you anticipate to happen?
So first off, while I do enjoy suing people, I always make sure I have a good case first. So I want to see what they say. If they just affirm that, what they already have, there's no need to bring a lawsuit. But if they have any way that limits the closing of the primaries, I'm going to find me some good organization like Conduit News and the Saline County Republican Women, and we're going to go straight to federal court, because the federal court is clear, and this affects our federal candidates. So we have jurisdiction in federal court and get it out of the cesspool that is sometimes the state judiciary, because they do get bogged down in politics. You can see the cases that I brought this summer killed by politics, voting machines and paper ballots killed by politics at the Supreme Court.
What would you say to any legislators who are perhaps being whipped or influenced to get involved in legislation regarding this?
Well, I would choose very carefully. The state doesn't like it when they get sued in federal court and they have to lose, and sovereign immunity doesn't apply there. You get to pay some attorney's fees out of that. So let's avoid that. Let's just all work together to get this the right way. It's not complicated. Really, if anything, the state board could create a rule that says you can only give primaries ballots in the primaries to those of the Republican Party. And so that's really simple. There is no hoop jumping, magic, lottie-dottie, whatever you want to call it, that has to happen.
Yeah, well, and also, if the Republicans, this has been in the platform for how many years now, 2 or 3 years, and the people overwhelmingly spoke, listen to the will of the people.
That's true. People are saying, oh, this is a kook faction, or this is like some kind of weirdo minority. This was the majority of the party. There were 600 voting delegates, over 600 voting delegates in Rogers last weekend, and they voted. They voted in the majority for this overwhelmingly. So, I think I was telling you, it's funny when they at the end, they're like, hey, let's move up the presidential electors. And like, no, not yet. And then now they run outside in the hall and say, hey, Embassy Suites woman, go tell them they have to get out now. Now they can't have any more time. And so we get out and we move up to the Commerce Room, which is smaller. And then they're like, oh, they're still going. So they go to the front desk at the hotel and they say, call the fire marshal. They're over capacity. And I met with the cop that was there. And I was like, dude, the room holds 511, we got 349. He's like, yeah, have a good night. But that's how desperate they were. It's like
Yeah.
it's like when that old joke about I fell off a horse and my leg was caught in the saddle and it kept
Yes.
whacking me in the head. And well, how'd you get off? It's like, oh, the guy from Walmart came out and unplugged the machine. That's literally what they're doing, because the party establishment was pulling the plug and they're looking at it and they're like, oh, it's going still. What do we do?
It's like, can't be stopped.
Yes, and so that it can't be stopped. It wasn't a violation of the
Yeah.
rules. It was not a violation of the law. The rules for conventions, for state conventions, say the vote of the body will be the final authority. So look, when the Supreme Court of the United States rules against you, you're out of it, except for your appeal to heaven.
Yeah.
And so, but you're not going to be, okay, Supreme Court, you're wrong because the United Nations said so. That's not how it works. We are the final arbitrator and decision maker there. There is no appeal. This is a done deal.
Anything else you want to add before we let you go?
I just so appreciate coming in and seeing all your shiny screens and
So
stuff.
nice to hear.
Right. No, I really appreciate you having me, Jen.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Clint. Always appreciate you and Jennifer just sharing your insight and expertise on all of this. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.